We can now bring in William Lawrence, professor of political science and international affairs at American University, and he's a former U.S. diplomat. Thank you very much for joining us on the program today. Donald Trump essentially has gone and done what he said he wouldn't do. That's extend the ceasefire in place. Do these policy flip-flops essentially prove that the U.S. president is out of his depth here?
By half. His strategy is to be chaotic and unpredictable. He's deliberately unpredictable. So it's not only inexperience or inability, but it's a deliberate attempt, much to the protestations of his aides, that he thinks he can force Iran to the table by being, hyperbolic and apocalyptic and chaotic. And he said it. It's been quoted in the press on multiple occasions, which means it diminishes the ability of that tactic to work, which is one of the reasons the Iranians respond with so much mockery and so much bravado, because it's political theater with high stakes.
If you're referring to the Wall Street Journal article, which says that Donald Trump essentially is trying to sound unstable as some sort of tactic. But again, it doesn't seem to be working because he's not getting the Iranians to the table. He's not getting the Iranians to listen to or to stop its nuclear program or to give up its highly enriched uranium.
That's exactly right. But I think another very important dynamic is that both sides think they're winning militarily. And it is true the U.S. is winning the conventional war and Iran is winning the asymmetrical and the strategic war. And since they think they're winning, the negotiation term is batna, their best alternative to negotiated agreement, is to just talk as if they want to continue the war. And both sides are talking that way, even though both Iran and the United States want the war to end. But much on their own terms. And of course, it's Israel that wants the war to continue and go deeper.
I want to talk about Israel in just a second, but going back to this Wall Street Journal article, it seems that Donald Trump is bored and is trying to focus on other issues. The article talks about how he's distracted by his ballroom plans. Given all of this, how does the U.S. get out of this conflict?
By softening its demands. So Trump had his list of 15 demands. Iran had its list of 10. Trump kept mischaracterizing what the Iran demands were and ignoring what they were in many cases. He agreed to them at one point. Yes, he's highly distractible and very much concerned with domestic politics and with the markets, both the stock market and the oil price market. And of course, there are all the phone calls flooding in internationally saying, please end this war, which he does want to do, but he wants to end it in a way that looks like he won and looks like he got something better than the JCPOA, whatever Obama did, which is another obsession of his. And so it needs to include nuclear concessions that look like more than what was in the JCPOA, and conventional military, i.e. missiles, and concessions on proxies, or things that look like that. The Iranians would do well to take a page out of the Denmark playbook when they sort of handed Trump a victory in Greenland that wasn't a victory. Even the Venezuelans did something similar. So you sort of have to create a proposal that looks like you won without necessarily conceding too much.
You spoke about how the U.S. Has sort of won the conventional war, but then there's an asymmetrical war. And we are seeing Iran use a lot of artificial intelligence, a lot of videos being generated online. I just want to play the latest one, which the Iranians have put out.
We are having very great negotiations with Iran. If Iran doesn't come to negotiate, we're going to bomb them.
2,000 years later.
So where are the Iranians?
This is from Iran.
All right. Then I will extend the ceasefire at Pakistan's request.
So that's just an example of what the Iranians have been putting out during the course of this conflict. William Lawrence, let me bring you in once again. What do you think Tehran is trying to send with these sorts of AI generated videos which keep popping up on social media? Essentially, they're trying to portray the US president as a clown.
100%. And I have to say, this isn't new. I've been watching Iranian generated memes on US politics for over 10 years, often sent to me by my Iranian contacts. So this isn't new, but the production quality's gone up and the strategy is now a national strategy rather than just, popularly generated mockings of the United States. And the point is to respond to his hyperbole with mockery. It's effective. It's not effective in terms of getting Trump to bow down, but it's effective to sort of sway international opinion against Trump, which then Trump dislikes, and that pushes them to more hyperbole and concessions. And the concessions are: he just extended the ceasefire unilaterally. He's made a number of concessions without even necessarily intending to. The Iranians demanded that Vance be the head of delegation. He conceded on that point. I mean, the both the real and the symbolic concessions are quite there. I think the risk here is that Iran overplays their hand, and Trump did refer to divisions in the Iranian delegation, and there's really great reporting in The Economist that said the delegation that went to Islamabad had 80 members, 30 of which were decision makers, in sharp disagreement with each other. One he called sort of the JCPOA group, and the other one they called the autarkic group that thinks Iran doesn't need a deal and can just go it alone and be self-reliant and fight forever. And the Pakistanis spent a lot of time at the last negotiations mediating between the two Iranian sides. And Trump was tweeting about that this morning. That's why I brought it up, because he's using the perceived Iranian disarray on their side as the excuse for the ceasefire, the justification for the ceasefire.
You said that this conflict could end if the US lowers its demands. But if the US goes ahead and does that, how do you keep Israel happy? Because Israel, as you said, wants this war to continue.
You forced them into an agreement. They were forced into all three Gaza ceasefires. They were forced into both Lebanese ceasefires and the current negotiation. In fact, although ceasefires for Israel are really less fires because they always keep firing if they see anything moving.
Exactly.
But they have a 7-front war, and they'd like all of those to be active when they want to be active and at their whim. And Trump is the only person in the world, other than the Israeli public, if they vote out Netanyahu, that can get Netanyahu to stop.
But for example, we have a ceasefire in place in Lebanon. Donald Trump last week quite clearly and categorically said Israel is prohibited from firing on Lebanon. Yet we have ceasefire violations in Lebanon. So yes, the US president can try and arm twist all he wants, Benjamin Netanyahu, but at the end of the day, Israel, as you said, wants these conflicts to keep going.
Yeah, there's an old adage for Middle East specialists that say ceasefires in the Middle East mean the Palestinians or the Arabs cease and the Israelis fire. There's a long history there of Israel not really respecting the rules, firing whenever it wants, violating as far as they can go, and pushing who's ever supporting them to the limit. And they pushed them so far that the Europeans have started to abandon them in many respects, certainly on trade agreements, and the Americans have had it. And there's no lost love between Netanyahu Trump and Netanyahu, despite all the gushing praise he gets when Trump visits and other Americans visit. The key here, in part, is Kushner and Wickoff, who've been somewhat demoted as negotiators, with Vance coming in ahead of them, and they're viewed by the Iranians and other mediators as just delivering the mail for Trump. But they very much represent Bibi in these negotiations, and sometimes take the harder line on things, which can scuttle the deals. So yes, Israel will go absolutely as far as it can, and then maybe 2 steps further, and then it's always the Americans that have to rein them in.
And what's funny is the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is nowhere at these discussions. William Lawrence, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you for joining us on the program today.
Pleasure.